One of the biggest travel knitting myths is that you need to check your airline's website to determine whether or not you are allowed to bring knitting needles on the flight. And I'm going to tell you that in most cases, that is not where you're going to get accurate information. Remember that you are not flying based on the airline's rules. You're flying based on the country that you're flying from, what their government says the rules are. So for example, I live in America, and so we have what's called the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. And they are the governing agency at all the airports all around the country that determine what you're allowed to bring through security. So in America, TSA does allow knitting needles and scissors under 2 inches or about 6 centimeters in blade length. So I know that if I'm flying from America to anywhere else in the world, I'm allowed to bring my knitting needles on the plane because I know what the TSA agents are going to allow. However, when I get to another country and I'm ready to come home back to America, it doesn't matter what TSA says. If I'm in India, I now have to follow their laws and their regulations. And so I now need to find out what India allows. Let's say I'm flying Delta. It doesn't matter what Delta says because Delta is an American company and they say, yeah, you're allowed to bring knitting needles, but that's only if it's originating from the US. Now I'm in India, still flying Delta, and now I have to fly based on India's governing agency for their airport security. So I'm going to show you how you look to find out whether or not you're allowed to bring knitting needles or scissors on your flight, depending on what country you're in. And this is the process that I use anytime I'm flying to a country I've never been to before. So I'm going to bring in my laptop and I'm going to do a screen recording and show you exactly what I search for whenever I'm trying to determine whether or not my knitting needles and my scissors are going to be safe. So let's look at the laptop. Here's just a basic Google website. Now what you want to start by searching for is the generic "Are knitting needles allowed on India flights?" That's going to give you some starting solid information. However, AI doesn't always get everything right. So AI comes up saying knitting needles are fully permitted in checked baggage for India flights, but they are prohibited in carry-on hand luggage, which means I'm not knitting on a flight if it's originating from India. And so here's the information I want. The Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, BCAS. That is India's version of the TSA. That's the website that's going to tell me what I need to know, hopefully. Let's find out, because it's not always as easy as you'd like it to be. So I'm going to do the BCAS. Actually, I'm going to copy all of this, the Bureau, and I'm going to go back up here and ask for their website because I want to go direct to the source. Here's the website. Here it is, the government of India. That's all good. And now I'm going to search for prohibited items. Brings up 2 search results. So I'm going to open this in a new window. This one is talking about gunpowder fuels and explosive military stores. That doesn't help me. Here, this one is talking about artfully concealed firearms and flare guns. That doesn't help me at all. And those are the only 2 bits of information. It doesn't give me a list of prohibited items, which is really annoying. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide which airline originates and is from India. I know that Air India is from India. And so I don't like to look at what the airline is saying. However, if the government website doesn't give you information, which I'm going to be totally honest, there's a lot of countries that don't have very good information. My next step is to find an airline that flies direct in India. So Air India website. Here we go, Air India. And I'm going to go up to prepare for travel, baggage guidelines. And this is pretty general. Whatever airline you're looking at, this is basically the steps you're going to take. And now you're going to find the restricted items and baggage advisory. Learn more. Now the information is here and it's all sort of broken up into all these different categories. And sometimes websites will give you a search option. So I'm going to type in knitting. And then it doesn't look like anything happened. However, I do know their website and you can now see that tools has opened up, scrolling down, and knitting and crochet needles. Probably should say knitting needles and crochet hooks, but we'll give them a pass. Carry on, no. You are not bringing your knitting needles or your crochet hook on a flight originating from India. But I do have a caveat for that. Hold on. Got some more information about that. When I say no, a little bit of a loose no. Next thing I want to know is scissors. Well, if they're not allowing knitting needles, they're probably not going to allow scissors. So let's go to scissors. Scroll down. Box cutters. Oh, meat cleavers aren't allowed. That's shocking. Scissors. Carry-on, no. And notice it doesn't say anything about the blade size. They are just saying no. Scissors are not allowed. Don't do it. Don't try. I want to look for one more thing before we move on. I'm going to say nail clippers. And nail files are allowed. Nail clippers without knife are allowed. So if I need scissors, I'm going to bring nail clippers. So as you can see, it is not as straightforward as just checking the airline that you're flying's website. If you're flying out of India on a Delta airline, because Delta is an American company, it's going to say knitting needles are allowed. And you're going to get to the security in India and they're going to say, hey, you're not allowed to bring these knitting needles on a flight. And you say, well, I'm flying Delta, and they say it's okay. They don't care about Delta. They care about what their governing agency says. So you're going to want to make sure that you check the airlines that are originating and are from the country that you're flying from, if you can't get the information direct from the website, from the governing agency, which the BCAS in India doesn't have information. So that's the next thing you want to do. Now I have a little bit of a caveat about this. I like to joke and say that I am more dangerous without my knitting or my crochet than I am with. One thing I want you to really understand is those security agents have the ultimate authority. If you get an agent that says you can't bring this, you can't bring it. Don't even try. Don't even mess with that. You need to abide by their laws, and that person, whatever they say, it goes. You might be upset, you might not be happy about it, but they are the person that is going to determine whether or not you fly at all and you get home at all. So if they say no, it's a no. Just leave it at that. However, I do know from personal experience that wooden knitting needles don't show up generally on the security scans. So if I go to a country and I know that I'm not allowed to bring knitting needles onto a flight, I don't bring metal knitting needles onto a flight. I will bring wood needles, and I don't think I've ever had wood needles confiscated. And I don't bring like big wood needles. I bring just the 4-inch tips for my ChiaoGoo knitting needles, which I'm going to show you at the end of the video what my favorite travel knitting needles are. But I do bring then the wood tips, and I also bring interchangeable, because if I get to that security agent and they find my wood knitting needles and they say you can't bring these on, I will just take off the tips, those wood tips. I'll put on a stopper, and then I have my project on that cable, and I do then have to get rid of and give up my confiscated knitting needles. However, my project is still on a cable, and I just had to say goodbye to the tips of one set. So I do bring my knitting on basically every flight, but if the airline says you're not allowed to have knitting needles, I bring wood, and then I pray and hope that they allow them through. However, if they say no, I don't fight it. So if you are looking to determine whether or not you're allowed to bring your knitting needles or your scissors or even your crochet hooks on a flight, check the government agency for the country you're flying from. If you can't find that information, go to an airline that originates from that country. So that is the little bit of information that I really wish was more clear out there. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions about airlines and about whether or not you're allowed to bring them on a flight, leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them. I have flown on dozens of airlines in countries all over the world, and I've definitely had some experiences. But at the end of the day, I never argue with security because they are the ones determining whether or not you get through that security, and I don't want to be stuck in another country. I'm Krista, and I'm on a quest to check off 1,000 bucket list adventures, and I'm going to be traveling all over the world to check off these items, and I will be bringing my knitting and or my crochet with me on all of these trips. So you're gonna wanna make sure to click subscribe, follow me along for this adventure, and see what I'm knitting, what I'm crocheting in different parts of the world as I check off those bucket list items. And next I'm gonna be showing you the knitting needles that I always bring with me no matter where in the world that I'm traveling. So let's check those out. So this is the ChiaoGoo interchangeable twist set, and I do get the 4-inch tips. My hands prefer the 4-inch tips. And I also have way more in here than what comes in the original set. I probably have maybe 3 or 4 sets in this one case. I travel in my RV for half the year. I do international travels all over the world, and I don't bring this if I'm going to an international just because it's too heavy and I like to pack light, but these are the needles that I bring. And as you can see, I've got a lot of them. And as I was saying, that if I need to have wood tips to sort of sneak through security, they also have the interchangeable wood tips. And so these are really nice to have just in case they get confiscated. You do not want to try and bring this entire pouch, especially through a country like India, because all of this will be taken away, and that's like hundreds of dollars of knitting needles. But this is the set that I love. And then in my pouch here, I have all of my cables, and I have them marked as S for the small and L for large. And I even have the little ends that you need to put on. So if you do get your needles confiscated, I will always have a set of these with me so that I can twist them onto the end of my cable and just give up my knitting needles and not lose my stitches, not have to take my needle completely out of my work. So I do travel with that. But this right here is the ultimate traveling knitters set. I love these. I have a link to these in the description below. I never leave home without these. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are a knitter or crocheter and you love to travel, you're probably forgetting some of the most important items that are going to make your trip and your project so much more enjoyable. So be sure to watch this video and find out what items you're probably forgetting when you pack your projects. Thanks for being here. I'm Krista Ann, and I'll see you on the next adventure. Bye. Finny is still passed out, as per usual.